Greetings all, this is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm bringing another list video, taking a look at 10 great Marvel Omnibus editions for new readers. There are so many great collections to choose from, and I tried to vary my list as much as possible so that hopefully there's something on here for just about everyone. But before we dive in, I just want to shout out channel sponsor OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own collected editions today, I highly recommend you check out their website. You can even use my code, TheComicBookReport, at checkout to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a great way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering, and now let's get started with today's list. First up on our list, the Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 1. For me, this is where X-Men really began. I love reading the pages of giant-size X-Men before we jump into the Chris Claremont era for this book. To me, this really revolutionized this title, and this is really the squad of mutant characters that most audiences are most familiar with. For me, this is what debuted Wolverine for the X-Men team. Yes, he premiered before this in some issues of The Incredible Hulk, but to have him join the X-Men, this is where it starts. We have characters like Colossus, Nightcrawler, Storm, and so many more making their first appearances in the pages of comic books. It's just an incredible book with an incredible set of stories, and again, this kicks off the entire Claremont era of X-Men. I know that this is a title that so many people are interested in, but get so daunted by the continuity and just all of the backstory and baggage that can come with this book and franchise. But I think for my money, this is one of the very best place to start reading X-Men. You can jump aboard here, fill in the gaps of everything that came before, and really just continue this ride for decades of comic book history into the modern era. It's such a fun read. I absolutely love it. I know another great point I recommend jumping onto X-Men for people is something like Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men, or even Jonathan Hickman's House of X Powers of 10. Both of those are a little bit more modern as far as the reading goes, but if you don't mind throwing back to like the 70s and 80s, I highly recommend checking out this Uncanny X-Men Omnibus. You can usually find the issues here collected in other collections as well, like Epic collections or some other smaller collections, digital, things like that. In case this is currently out of print, these things come into print every so often, so if you're interested in this, definitely keep an eye out. Highly recommend this as a great starting point for those who want to check out Marvel Comics, and particularly if you want to get into omnibus collections. Next up, of course, Daredevil by Frank Miller and Klaus Janson Omnibus from Marvel Comics. This is a reprint edition that came out pretty recently. I absolutely love this collection. So this is their entire kind of proper Daredevil run. There is a companion omnibus that I'm hoping gets a reprint sometime in the future that has things like Daredevil Born Again, Man Without Fear, and a couple other Frank Miller odds and ends in the Daredevil universe. But this omnibus here is that entire main stretch of run that a lot of people associate Frank Miller with on that Daredevil book. We have the introduction of characters like Stick and Elektra. We have the Kingpin show up and kind of elevate himself as one of Daredevil's premier villains. Before this, yes, he was a Spider-Man villain and someone who was familiar in the Marvel Universe, but it's really during Frank Miller's run that Kingpin really took his rightful place as an arch-villain for Daredevil. We also have tensions really mounting with Bullseye and Daredevil in this edition. There are so many just iconic issues. I think that this is a spectacular place to begin reading Daredevil, as it's really the kind of renaissance for this character. Frank Miller added so many key aspects to the mythos of Daredevil, his origins, some supporting cast of characters and villains, even the Hand, that whole ninja clan, all of that was Frank Miller's addition to the character, and you can see the beginning of all of that here in this book. It's a really great kind of gritty detective crime noir kind of feel to the series. It definitely has a lot of edge, and it really set the tone for all of the contemporary Daredevil runs moving moving forward. I know I love things like the Bryan Michael Bendis run and the Zdarsky run and so many of these modern Daredevil books, but I would posit that I don't think any of these would exist without the foundational footprint that Frank Millar added to this character. And you can definitely check it out here in the pages of this omnibus. Because of that, highly recommend it for new readers. Next up, of course, we have one of my absolute favorites, the Wolverine Omnibus Volume 1. I absolutely treasure this collection, and it is my favorite place to start reading Wolverine. We have not only his first appearances in the pages of Incredible Hulk, but we also have all of his first solo adventures. We also have the Weapon X series from Barry Windsor Smith, along with, again, all of these great stories like Chris Claremont and Frank Millar's Wolverine 4-issue miniseries, before launching into just all of the Madripoor era Wolverine stories. If you've never read Wolverine by himself, reading this collection is a perfect primer on this incredible character. No, we do not get a lot of his early exploits on the X-Men team. For that, you want to look back at that first Uncanny X-Men omnibus I showed moments ago. But really, for his first appearance and all of his early solo stuff, there's really no better source for me than this omnibus here. The fact that we not only get his first appearances, but like I said, we get that 4-issue miniseries from Frank Millar and Chris Claremont, a personal favorite of mine, and also the Weapon X series that is so gritty and gruesome, showing the origin of how he got the adamantium skeleton in his claws, things like that. It's just a horrendous story, beautifully illustrated. It's so traumatic and gnarly just seeing what the character goes through. Barry Windsor Smith captures this character beautifully, and that's all before we really get into the meat of this omnibus, which are all of those adventures in Madripoor and beyond. I love this story. I know I had several of these stories, like Weapon X as its own separate collection. I had some of the Madripoor era stuff in an epic collection once upon a time, but to have it all in one omnibus edition, it really is such a great collection. I highly recommend it. Such a fun read. And hey, while I have you here, if you're enjoying this video and you enjoy things like comic book reviews, unboxing, and more, definitely consider subscribing to my channel. I'd love to have you as a watcher. Thank you so much for considering. Now on with the list. Next, and perhaps most controversially on this list, X Factor Omnibus Volume 1 by Peter David. I just loved this book. I don't think that this is necessarily an essential Marvel Comics read. However, for fans of X-Men or the greater X books, this was a real hidden gem for me that I never had the opportunity to read and barely had the opportunity to hear about before picking up this omnibus at a great deal. So this is Peter David's first run on the X Factor title. He did eventually come back like a decade or so later during the House of M era for more X Factor work, but this is his entire 90s run. You don't need this to enjoy the later X Factor run. However, it's really a fun foundational 90s X book. The art throughout is just really stylized and gripping. There's so much great experimentation being done with the splash pages and the panel formatting. Some of the art for the character models almost have kind of a manga sort of anime feel or aesthetic to them. A lot of sharp, hard edges and lines. Really just gritty and fun. I did review this entire book on my channel once upon a time, but I know for me, one of my favorite things that sticks out when I think about this book is how much love Peter David gave to these characters and just how he crafted them, all of their dynamics. The relationship with the team itself is just really well done. I cared so deeply for all of the main cast of characters that at a certain point I didn't care what adventures they got up to. As long as they were in it, I was having a good time. This series also has a lot of great 90s action, balanced with a ton of great dry humor. There were points in this book where I really just started laughing reading it. I think that so many of the characters are really just likable. There are a handful that are just truly tragic characters, and everything was handled with a lot of respect. I was so impressed with this book. It actually made me completely reevaluate 90s comics in general. This was just such a gem for me that I hope more and more people read, and that's why I included it on this new readers list. Next up, we have the Annihilation Omnibus from Marvel Comics. Admittedly, I'm still wrapping this book up myself, but I've read more than enough of this book, enough to really still recommend it for new readers out there who are looking for not only a Marvel event omnibus, but really are looking to dive into the more cosmic side of the Marvel Universe. This is really considered the birth of the modern Cosmic Marvel books. So this is after the kind of the Infinity Gauntlet, the Infinity Wars, all of those kind of earlier Cosmic Marvel adventures, and really kicks off the more modern era for Space Marvel. I also love that it is, like I mentioned, an event omnibus, meaning that we don't just have one specific run of comic books, we have everything linked around this one event series. In this case, it's Annihilation, but we have all of the mini-series and miscellaneous issues that feed in and tie into that event, and you just have one singular experience. I really, really like the approach of this book. It basically kicks off with 4 separate mini-series that all kind of serve as a prelude to this main event. We follow characters in these mini-series like Drax the Destroyer, the Super Skrull, Silver Surfer, and Nova. These are all characters I've been familiar with to varying degrees over time, but I think reading this book made me care about each of them in a new way. I love just these kind of cosmic adventures where it's not what we see, the street level heroics, the world saving events. This is on a galactic and sometimes universal scale. It's about a band of misfit heroes trying to save the universe against an unstoppable horde of enemies. I don't know that I've ever read anything like this, and the fact that this is happening in the same universe as something like Spider-Man or Daredevil really just blows my mind. I think that this really shows the nuance of the Marvel Universe. I think fans of kind of space adventures, space opera, science fiction, galactic kind of fantasy would really love this series. I also wanted to include it just because it's something different than your standard Marvel fare, and I think that there's really an audience for this. Highly recommend it. Next on our list today, The Ultimates by Mark Millar and Bryan Hitch Omnibus. I reviewed this not too long ago on my channel, but I wanted to include an Avengers book in this list, a great team book for people trying to get into that, and so I had to go with the Ultimates. So this is within Marvel's Ultimate Universe, not the mainstream 616, but this is basically a modern kind of relaunch for your Avengers books. We have all of the kind of mainstream Avengers classic characters we expect from something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, some of the mainstays in Marvel like Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Ant-Man and Wasp. Some of these characters, they all show up, they form the Avengers, or in this universe, the Ultimates, and they kind of save the day. But why I like this is there's a lot of like nuance, there's a lot of politics. We have sort of like the optics and kind of the underpinnings of what it would be like to be a superhero or superhero team in a modern world, and I really like that. This was a really fresh take on older characters as well, very modernized, in the turn of the millennium, and I mean, nowadays some of these references and things in this book might even feel a little bit dated, but compared to all the way back in like the Silver Age, this is still a very modern feel. The art from Bryan Hitch is absolutely commendable to give us a really cinematic scope, particularly with the battle sequences. It's just amazing to see just kind of the scale in which he presents this artwork. Like I said, it helps the storytelling so much, and this is just a book that I have remembered for years and years and years after reading. I love this book for new readers as well because it's a great way to get introduced to some of these characters. The characters, like I said, in this book feel very modern, in many ways flawed and relatable. I also wanted to include it because there are so many familiar faces with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and that set of films. I think this would be a great on-ramp for new readers who maybe like the movies and want a way to kind of just get into the comic books themselves. Definitely would recommend The Ultimate. Of course, I had to include the Captain America by Ed Brubaker Omnibus. This is a volume 1 for a 5-volume set of omnibuses that collect the entire Ed Brubaker era for this title. But for my money, this is one of the best entries in that whole set, and I think it's a perfect on-ramp for new readers who want to check out the character of Captain America. This book is just so good at setting up a new norm and standard for this hero. To me, it's the absolute gold standard for Captain America runs, period. I have never read something that has rivaled it in my opinion, and right from the beginning, we jump into the Winter Soldier story arc, which for fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like I mentioned before, might be a kind of suggestive title title you'll be familiar with, but the comic has so many more layers and has so many different twists and turns that we don't see on the screen that I think for fans of that movie who have not read this comic, there's still a ton to love here. I love all the story arcs we get in this book. We have at least a good handful here, and it leads us right up to another pivotal event in Marvel history and in the world of Captain America. Such a fantastic book. I think it's absolutely accessible to new readers. Highly recommend it for those that want kind of a spy, political, kind of espionage sort of genre book. Yes, we have some kind of superheroics, of course, but it feels more like an international thriller kind of spy drama more than a superhero narrative in many ways. And I think that's really to this book's strength. We also have a lot of just crime elements to this book as well. I think that Brubaker absolutely knows how to handle kind of criminal sort of genre books. And because of that, we just really have a masterclass in storytelling here across this book. All of the artists attached to this are also phenomenal. They really serve the narrative and convey an impeccable sense of storytelling, momentum, pacing. This book is one that you will not be able to put down. I highly recommend it. Such a huge fan of this run. If you've never read it, definitely try to check out Ed Brubaker's time on Captain America. Next up, we have Fantastic Four by Jonathan Hickman Omnibus Volume 1. Wow, was this omnibus such a treat. This was my favorite read of 2022, and this was a set I am so happy to have. So for those that don't know, Jonathan Hickman's time on Fantastic Four is considered one of the best runs in that whole franchise's history. His entire run is broken across 2 volumes, so this is volume 1 of a 2-volume omnibus set, but it's absolutely impeccable. We have just an incredible chapter of the lives of this famous, fantastic family, and it's just done in a way I've never seen handled before. I think Jonathan Hickman really knows how to tell a story of truly epic scope, and that's really what we have here. We have one grand master storyline that is served by all of these other smaller story arcs that all serve a singular vision for storytelling across these 2 books, and it is an absolute triumph to read and a marvel to behold. The art throughout is also absolutely incredible. You can even see from these pages here. It is stunning work. This is one of my favorite, not only my favorite Fantastic Four run that I've had the pleasure of reading thus far, it is one of my favorite comic book story arcs and runs of all time. This is one that absolutely stays with me. Another great modern run. For those that maybe don't like reading older comics, this is a fantastic modern run I would recommend to just about anyone. Like I said, epic storytelling on a massive scale. It all pays off in the end. I love how it sticks its landing, but even from the beginning pages, it's just such an incredible read. I also think the characters are handled just really wonderfully, particularly the characters of the Human Torch and Mr. Fantastic. Those 2 really do share the spotlight in the Hickman era, but they really do some new things with both of those characters I had just never seen before. The character drama is just really great. I think, again, for fans of science fiction, and even just for general fans of great, epic-scaled storytelling, it's hard to do better than Jonathan Hickman's time on Fantastic Four. Next up, The Silver Surfer by Dan Slott, Mike and Laura Allred Omnibus from Marvel Comics. So this was one of my newer pickups from the last several months. It was reprinted recently. Hopefully you can still find it in print if you're interested. I wanted to include this on my list today because it's not only a great omnibus for new readers, it's also a fantastic example of a one-and-done series where you can read this beginning, middle, and end, and leave, and you don't feel like you need to read stuff to set it up, and you don't feel like you necessarily need to go somewhere and read something afterward. It's a complete storytelling experience in and of itself. It fills in the gaps that you need narratively, and it really feels like its own kind of isolated book. It doesn't really get too bogged down with the other happenings within the Marvel Universe. It's really just here to tell its story. And at its core, it really is a love story between the Silver Surfer, Norrin Radd, and his new paramour, Dawn Greenwood, as they span the cosmos and even go back to Earth for so many miscellaneous adventures. There's a lot of warmth, a lot of heart, a lot of tragedy, and a lot of triumph and joy throughout this run. I was absolutely charmed and spellbound all the way through. It was almost impossible to put down. The art from the Allreds is absolutely impeccable. It is heavily stylized for those unfamiliar with their art style, so definitely check it out. It's a husband and wife life. Mike Allred does all the pencils, and then Laura Allred, I believe, provides the coloring, but it really is just impeccable work. I absolutely love it. I also just think the sheer amount of wonder and, yes, kind of romanticism that Dan Slott brings to this book, it really showed me a whole other gear that author could operate out of that really just left me captivated, transfixed, and absolutely moved by the story's ending. I think this is great for new readers because you really don't need to know too much before picking up this book. I know longer-term fans of Silver Surfer might be surprised at a much warmer touch to the character who's usually very introspective, broody, cold, and contemplative, but here we get to see a lot more of his humanity, for lack of a better term, an absolutely stunning read. And finally, last on our Marvel Omnibus list today, Miles Morales Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 1 by Bryan Michael Bendis. I couldn't do a Marvel Best Of list without a Spider-Man title, and there were so many to choose from. I almost picked the Volume 1 from the Silver Age, or even the Peter Parker Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, but I think in observation of the new Spider-Verse movie coming out, and just because I think this run deserves even more credit, I had to go today with Miles Morales Spider-Man. This is an incredible book that serves as not only an epilogue to the Ultimate Spider-Man series starring Peter Parker, also by Bryan Michael Bendis, but it's really the beginning of Miles' tenure on the title. It very much is its own thing. You absolutely do not need to read anything prior to this book to jump in and enjoy, but for fans of the Peter Parker Ultimate Spider-Man series, there is some great connective tissue, Easter eggs, and like I said, little things that serve as kind of an epilogue. Because of that, it really is a wonderful book. I love that it is new and old reader friendly. Like the Ultimates, this book is also set in the Ultimate Universe within Marvel's multiverse. Absolutely love this book though. It's the origin of Miles Morales. To see a new Spider-Man hold this mantle all his own is really a triumph. I am a fan of Peter Parker, of course, but I think Miles does an incredible job of being his own kind of decidedly different Spider-Man, carrying much of the same spirit, but with a very different background and his own set of ideals, goals, and personality. This book is really a masterclass on writing from Bendis, and I really loved what we see with another new modern Spider-Man book. I think this book also has some great supporting casts of characters, and it's just fun to see a new Spider-Man. If you enjoy Into the Spider-Verse and you're excited to see that Across the Spider-Verse movie, and you're looking to read a comic, there's no better recommendation I have than this Miles Morales Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 1. An incredible, incredible book that I thoroughly enjoyed. This is another one I had a hard time putting down. Definitely recommend it as a great omnibus from Marvel for new readers. And that's it. That's our 10 great Marvel Omnibus editions for new readers. There were so many others I could have recommended. I know I could have thrown back to a lot of Silver Age greats like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four run, or Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's Spider-Man run, or so many other books. But for me, I wanted to vary the list a little bit. I definitely went heavier on more modern titles for this list video. I would really enjoy your feedback. I'm still having a blast making these list videos for all of you, but I'd love to hear what you think. If there's any topics you'd also like to see me cover in a future top 10 or list video, I'd really be open to that below as well. I'm always looking for good recommendations, specifically for videos you're looking to see as well. I have plenty of ideas, but like I said, always open to feedback. Hope you enjoyed this. I'd also love to see in the comments section, what are some of your favorite Marvel Omnibus editions, or maybe even what are some of your favorite places to start Marvel comics? Maybe what would you recommend if you were starting to read comics for the first time? I think generally I'd really like to see this comment section filled with recommendations for new and returning readers to get some of the best Marvel comics out there. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a like. Please feel free, like I said, to tell me what you think in the comments. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and maybe check out some of my other videos. Have a good one.